Hi all, and welcome to episode 8 of Facets with Marilu. Today we have Dr. Lonky. Dr. Lonky is a triple board certified physician in internal medicine, pulmonary medicine, and critical care medicine, and a nationally recognized authority on the health effects of environmental toxins. Over a distinguished career spanning nearly 4 decades, Dr. Lonky has led groundbreaking research into how pollutants and toxins impact human health, linking them to chronic disease such as obesity and respiratory conditions. He earned his medical degree from Downstate Medical Center and completed advanced training at Barnes Hospital in St. Louis and UC San Diego Medical Center, where he was served as an NIH Fellow in Pulmonary Disease and Biochemistry. Dr. Lonky also holds an MBA from Pepperdine University. When Dr. Lonky is not, Dr. Lonky is also very avid a baseball fan, and when he's not on the stands watching baseball, he likes spending time with his family. Dr. Lonky is also very well traveled and has traveled to various countries. Please help me welcome Dr. Lonky.
Hi, thank you very much. I appreciate your introduction. Yes, I thought you were going to say when I wasn't busy with my medical work, I was playing baseball for a professional team and I was going to take my uniform out. No, I don't. But yes, that is my background. And my background is that I did train in internal medicine and I'm sorry about that. And
No, it's okay.
pulmonary diseases and critical care. I did research at UC San Diego, where I was a faculty member, and eventually went into private practice here in Los Angeles. The um, the interesting thing about my background is that I was a chemistry kind of nerd in my early years, and so I did work in biochemistry and was very interested in things that cause the lung to kind of consume itself or to become diseased at a biochemical level. And I guess I took that with me into practice. And as I went into practice and started to build an office practice, I realized when my office staff started telling me, these chairs are not wide enough for some of your patients. I realized that we were having a big problem with big people. And over the years of practice, I began to realize more and more that the bigger people were, the heavier they were, as they became obese and then some morbidly obese, medical complications became um, multiplied. That was my beginning of interest in obesity. I had a nurse practitioner who worked in my practice, and we're still very good friends, and she quizzed me every day as we made rounds in the hospital and particularly in intensive care units, because as a critical care doctor, I see a lot of people on ventilators. This was pre COVID. Um, and she was challenging me as to why. Why did we have so many complications with obese patients? And that started me about 10, 12 years ago, looking into the nitty gritty, peeling back the layers of the onion, so to speak, and thinking about some of the things that I do, because some of the things I do clinically, my research area was in inhalation exposures that cause the lungs to get sick. Most of those are toxic chemicals. People who were exposed to various chemicals at work or not at work in their homes, and who developed illnesses that didn't have an easy explanation. And as I became more and more adept at figuring out what was going on with these people, I began to realize that some of the changes that happened in these people were very similar to the the changes that were happening in obese individuals. So my deep dive into the causes of obesity led me to certain factors that seemed contradictory. For example, in the United States, we have spent in the last, 50 years, $3 trillion, actually more than $3 trillion US on weight loss products, diet foods, diet plans, diet pills, diet shots. And you know what's happened? We've gone from 14% obesity to 43% obesity. I would not call that a successful use of $3 trillion. Well, the diet companies would. They're very happy. So I realized, wait a second, we're not that stupid. And I realized that we don't have a weight loss problem. Anybody can lose weight. I tell my patients that all the time. Don't eat. Sew your mouth up. I mean, anybody can lose weight. If you starve yourself, you will lose weight. There is no question. And everything that you hear has to do with calories in and calories out. So,
Don't get me started.
right? Isn't that what we always do that? Calories in, calories out,
Yeah,
burn more
yeah.
calories, yada,
It's
yada. Food pyramids. I mean, maybe that's good for the Egyptians, but it's not good for us. Um,
no.
the fact is, we have spent a lot of money and gotten nowhere and understand now that anybody can lose weight. So I looked a little further and I realized, wait a second, it's not just humans that are getting fatter. It's animals are getting fatter. Our pets are getting fatter. In the US, we have a society for pet obesity. Can you believe that? I know, there's a society for everything. Um, uh, the fact is, we have animals in the wild, animals in the home getting fatter. And that's proven. That's been shown over the last 30, 40 years. Now, you would say, well, that's okay because, we eat kind of crummy food and we discard it and the animals eat that. And all right, explain this one. Animals in the laboratory, laboratory animals that we use for research, that you purchase as being raised on a very strict diet, you keep them on a very strict diet, they're getting fatter. Well, how could that be? So that's a big problem. But the best is newborns. We have a 25 to 30% increase in the weight of newborns in the last 25 years. Now, wait a second. How could newborns be getting fat? It's for certain that the fetuses are not going to a neighborhood store and buying Twinkies or donuts or cupcakes. They're not. It's not calories in and calories out for them. So that's where we have had the biggest eye opener for me. And I realized this is a lot more than calories in and calories out. And answering my own question that I asked before, if we can lose weight, why can't we keep it off? The reason that we're obese isn't because of what we're eating. It's how our bodies are set to deal with what we eat. And so I did a deeper dive and began to realize that, yes, this has been looked at, well, probably for 40 years now. We've had people looking at this issue for about 40 years. And the answer has to do with something called epigenetics. Now, that's a term people go, well, I don't know what that is. Well, here's what it is. You have your genes, your genetic gift from your parents. That is your DNA. That's yours. That's not easily changed. But there are 150 genes to 160 genes that are involved with weight maintenance, weight loss. You could call them 150 fat genes. There are. Now, the question, for example, you have a gene that will determine whether, if you're a developing fetus, you're making a muscle cell or a fat cell. What if I switch that gene in the direction of only making fat cells? That's not a good thing. Well, on the surface of the gene, of all of our genes, there are attachment points. Epi means surface. So epigenetic means it's not the gene itself, the DNA doesn't change. But on the surface of the gene, there's an attachment that happens that tells that gene how to behave. For example, you have tumor suppressor genes. You have many of them. You would like those tumor suppressor genes to be very active, suppressing any tumors that are growing. What if I turn some of them off? Oh, well, then you become more susceptible to what we call carcinogens, things that can cause cancer, because your tumor suppressor gene is not there functioning for you. Similarly, these 150 genes involved with weight management, they need to be set a certain way. It's like switches on a switchboard, and you want them all switched in the right direction. So this research has been going on for quite some time. Um, we understand this a lot from twin studies. For example, there are twins, same DNA, identical twins. They have identical DNA. One is thin, one is obese. It can't be genetic. It has to do with the environment that they were in, perhaps that their mother was in, and how it got interpreted into their epigenetic changes and how they lived their lives. So recognizing this meant there had to be a new approach to weight loss. And that's what I sat down and started writing a book. And the book really has to do with this. It has to do with looking at these issues and what you can do about it. Because here's the good news: you can't change your genes, but you can change you can't change your genetics, but you can change your epigenetics. That's the good news.
Yeah, so I will tell you how kind of I got in like I was made aware of epigenetics. I work in the recovery side of things, so substance misuse side of things, and it's quite interesting. Like we deal with a lot of clients who have lung diseases like COPD and stuff. And it's quite interesting, how everything kind of ties in together, not just the substance use but their diet, obviously. They're like a lot of them, some of them are not necessarily underweight either, which is quite interesting. When people go on about calories in, calories out, you say that doesn't exist, then people, get their backs up. But I mean, it
Yes,
is
I
what
know.
it
It's
is.
hard. It's hard for most of the population to come to grips with because they want to be able to go on a diet. But here's the statistics: the average dieter does about 4.4 diets a year. The average dieter, if they lose 10% or more of their body weight, will gain all of it back. Two-thirds of them, 67%, will gain their weight back in 2 years, and 95% within 5 years. So that's why we had a show on TV in the States called The Biggest Loser. I don't know if that ever made it to the UK, but they had these massively obese people. They put them through diets and workout plans, and week after week, you watch them melt away. And a lot of them lost in excess of 100 pounds. Well, they took the show off the air because after 2 years, they were gaining it back. It was an embarrassment. And these were people who were on an absolutely regulated diet after their diet. So they went on a calorie restrictive diet, and then they went on what was called a maintenance diet. Well, if your genes are set to take what you eat and turn it into fat cells, it doesn't really matter how little you eat. It's going to make fat cells unless you do something about it. Now, what causes these epigenetic changes is what's fascinating. We've known over the years that there are a number of things that are associated with obesity, but we didn't really understand them until about 20 or 25 years ago when in animal models we started looking at some of these chemicals, which I'll call obesogens. They generate obesity. They're termed obesogens. And what they are is they are chemicals that are unseen, but they're all around us. They're in plastics. They're in air fresheners. They're in uh, pesticides and insecticides. They're in the packaging of our food. They are things like bisphenol A. They are things like Scotch Guard for the furniture. Well, when I was a kid, we had a beautiful couch in the living room, but I never sat on the fabric because my mother had it covered in plastic. Okay,
I remember those
remember
days.
those? God, because they didn't have stain-resistant fabrics. And, you made a stain on that, you were banished from the house for at least a week. But the fact is, today we have Scotch Guard and we have flame retardant pajamas. That's a great idea. I mean,
Yes, there's a product, it seems, for everything today, and I think that ties into the problem, doesn't
it
it?
does because these are obesogens. They've been shown experimentally and to alter the epigenetic profile. We can look at certain individuals and look at their epigenetics. Those twins I was talking about, the thin one and the obese one, they have totally different epigenetic signature. Their genes are the same, but their epigenome is different. What I alluded to before is we can change our epigenetics. And in my book, Outsmarting Obesity, I've dedicated a whole big section to how you do that and how you start to do that. The thing that people have to remember is that these epigenetic changes, they occur in you and me, but we pass them on at least 3 generations. So they hang on. They hang on at the time of fertilization when sperm meets egg, and they are there. And eventually they do fall off, probably 3 to 4 generations, but we just keep renewing them. For example, when I was a kid, my mother used an iron skillet to make things. We didn't have Teflon. We didn't have non-stick cookware. We have it today. Those are perfluorochemicals. They are what are called forever chemicals. And
Same with the chopping boards, isn't it? Like they used to use like wooden chopping boards or whatever, and today it's all treated things and plastic chopping
and
boards and
think about how many times you take your stuff and you warm it up in the microwave, and it's in a plastic container. Such simple things. Put it on a ceramic plate. Put it in glass. Use
yeah, we've switched over to kind of like glassware for containers. We've tried to switch over like products, like we're very aware kind of what products we use specifically as well, like because the skin is the biggest, organ, isn't it?
it.
So whatever you put on your skin, it's you're gonna absorb and it's gonna affect your metabolism.
Right, and while we're on the subject, we could talk about makeup, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Those
Yeah.
parabens that are in your makeup that make it have a shelf life that's reasonable, they are obesogens. They change your epigenetics. Now, it's important for younger people, and I'm not saying that, older people shouldn't be looking at this, but I'm not going to be having any more children, I don't think. I'll talk my,
You never
no,
know.
who knows? But I would have to divide myself in order to do that. But the fact is, um, the younger people, if we keep going the way we're going, I mean, look at childhood obesity. In the US, it used to be when John Kennedy was president, it was just under 5%. Today, it's over 21% and going up. I
The UK is following a similar pattern with
Same
that.
pattern as adults, and the reason is that the reason we're seeing this increase is has to do with these epigenetic changes and the introduction of conveniences. A lot of these things are conveniences. We had companies saying better living through chemistry. That was their thing. But actually, it's not better living. It's more troublesome living with all those chemicals because our bodies are not meant to take care of them. And once they're in your body, like a paraben or a biphenyl ether, a chlorinated biphenyl ether, which is what is flame retardants. Um, Once they're in your body and they're in your bloodstream, you can't urinate them out because they're not water soluble. So they have to go and get fixed by the liver. Well, your liver is overwhelmed as it is. So much of the time, because the liver's busy, it says, you know what, I'm busy. Come back tomorrow. Maybe I'll have some time for you. Go sit in that fat cell over there because the only thing those molecules are soluble in is fat. So they go to your fat cell. Now, most people who are sitting and watching this, they don't know that their fat is actually very important. So you can't have no fat. Your fat cells are an endocrine organ. They are as important as your thyroid and your adrenals. They make hormones. People maybe have heard of things like leptin and aponectin. These are things made and secreted by fat cells. What does leptin do? Leptin is a signal from the fat cell to the brain saying, you're full, stop eating. You're not hungry anymore. What if that's broken? What if that leptin is not normal leptin? Some diabetics make insulin, but it's it's not really insulin. It's non-functional insulin. Same thing here. You can make non-functional leptin. So you make them plenty of it. The brain is saying, I don't know who the heck that is. It looks like it's a leptin pretender. We won't listen to him. And so what winds up happening is you overeat. Um, these are the things that are important for my kids and particularly my grandkids to be not aware of, because I can't teach all of this, but the parents have to be aware if we're going to make a change and we're going to stop this growing obesity epidemic, which is worldwide, by the way, it's not just the US. Anywhere we've introduced conveniences, we have had this happen. And so these conveniences are chemical conveniences. In the US, for example, we have 85,000 chemicals that we use today. Do you think they're cleared by, and you're no better in the UK. I'm going to tell you that.
No, I don't. I can't think that we are.
I was just there at the London Book Fair and talked to a number of publishers and editors because we're doing another book. I'm doing another book with a co-author. And the chemical industry, the chemical lobbies, if you will, are very, very strong. Um, and the fact is, we have a tremendous explosion of the number of chemicals that are cleared. They're not cleared by FDA. In the US, the Food and Drug Administration has nothing to do with clearing chemicals to be used. So we have these little things that you plug in the wall, and they make a scent for the room. They spew out a nice freshener, air freshener smell, right? Oh, that's very nice. And the only people that have to clear that for use is the Federal Trade Commission, which means it won't burn your house down. That's good. All right, that's safe. You can use it. Do we care about the chemicals? Oh no, no, that's not our job. Well, whose job is it? It's nobody's job. No. So you put that thing, you plug it in the wall, and it makes a very, very nice smell, and it makes these tiny little particles that are floating in the air that you can't see. They fall on the ground. Who crawls on the ground? Babies. What do they do with their hands? They put them in their mouth. Son of a gun. So let me tell you that the average newborn, this study's been done over and over again, The average newborn has over 200 toxins in its blood.
That's shocking.
So they already have epigenetic changes that have happened because they got them from mom. They got these chemicals across the placenta, and there they are. They can't detoxify anything because their livers are not working until they're born. They don't have detoxification capabilities. So this is the conundrum we're facing. And you could turn your head on it and say, "I think I'll just go on a diet and use Manjaro or Ozempic or one of these other crazy things." And people think, "Are you opposed to that?" No, I'm not opposed to anybody losing weight. I'm opposed to long-term use of any drug that you don't really need because there are going to be complications. But if you could lose 20 or 30 or 40 pounds doing that and then keep it off, then you can go to the next step and lose some more. So if your goal is to lose 50 pounds, take 10 pounds, lose the 10, and prove to yourself that you can apply some of the things that are outlined in my book, Outsmarting Obesity, a four-step program called AIPE, AIPE. Accept, accept the fact that you're carrying toxic chemicals and you're surrounded by them. That's tough for some people because they think they're safe. They say, "Wow, I eat organic food. I only eat fresh vegetables." Well, that's good. It's better than eating them from a can. But let's look at the real world. Here's the real world. So there's an organic farmer over here in California, and right next to him, maybe a mile or 2 miles away, is a non organic farmer. So he's spraying his crops. Some of those particles from the spray are in the wind. Do you mean to say that the organic farmer has a sign in the air above his farm saying no chemicals allowed?
Just a U-turn.
Some of those particles fall on the ground, and when it rains, they go into the groundwater. And under the ground, there are underground aquifers that take that water, and it's coming over. And again, the organic farmer does not have a sign in the ground underneath his farm saying, "Oh, no, we can't go there. We're not allowed." So the fact is, it's better to eat organically farmed. It's better to eat from a farm that is not exhausted and using all of these fertilizers. It's better to eat non hormone treated beef and poultry. It's better to eat, and some people will, this is one of the arguments for farmed fish because you don't know what's in the ocean. I particularly
Yeah,
like
the microplastics,
right.
isn't it?
I particularly like fresh fish, but you don't know what's out there. At least on the farm, I know they're in controlled waters. But the fact is, you have all of these things, and you've got to accept the fact that you are carrying a lot of toxins. That's number one. Identify is the second step. AI, and the I is identify all those places in your house. Simple things. Do you keep your cleaning products near your kitchen where you prepare food? I wouldn't do that. Do you have all plastic stuff? Do you heat stuff up in plastic? I wouldn't do that. Okay, so on and so start identifying all of the things, and we go through in the book a number of different activities that you can do to check your house. Then prevent. Now we're getting into the real nitty gritty of what do we do about toxins? We prevent their absorption into your body. These things in the air are fine if they're just in the air and they're not in your body. So think about your body enclosed by your skin as being your world. That's what you need to keep clean. You want to prevent the absorption. Well, where do we get most of this stuff? We've already alluded to. We either eat it or we drink it, and some of us put it on our skin.
Perfume.
Perfume,
That's the biggest culprit for people don't think about it. It's like they think it's natural oils but it's a massive endocrine disruptor.
very big, a very big endocrine disruptor. And We'll talk about that in a second. Oh, they'll do it right now. Well, you know what an endocrine disruptor is? Something that looks to the in for, let's use women, breast tissue, the uterus. You have receptors. You have estrogen receptors. Okay, so those estrogen receptors, when they are stimulated by estrogen, they start to develop. So we get breast development. We used to say, well, 14, 15, 16, 10-year-olds now. Okay,
Yeah,
breast development.
it's getting very young,
Very young.
like the age,
My
yeah, very
granddaughter had her,
puberty
yeah,
hitting.
my granddaughter had her first menstrual cycle before she was 11.
Wow,
Wow.
that's
I
that's
almost
really
fell off my
young.
chair. And,
Yeah.
and, and, and yet, we did everything we could. And we do it continuously with my daughter and then with my granddaughter that, you know, try and keep it as good as you can, so on and so forth. They don't use nonstick cookware. I don't use nonstick cookware. But if you go to a restaurant and you get a muffin, well, did they use nonstick? You don't know. You have no idea.
No. It's the seed oils as well. It's so infiltrated
Yes. So
everywhere.
why don't we do this? Why don't we prevent the absorption? And that we go through different in the book. Go through a number of different methods, all natural, no drugs, no medicines here that you can do, and it's not hard. It's really not to prevent it. You can use makeup that's paraben free. At least that's there are websites where you can find that. Uh, I plug the environmental working group. The foods that you eat. We have an app here in the U.S. Now I don't know if you have the equivalent in the U.K. I'll bet you do. It's called Yucca, Yuka. I give them free plugs. It's a free app. Um, and you just put it on your phone. And when you go to the market, you scan the barcode, and it suddenly comes up and shows you whether it's calorie rich, whether it's good, bad, excellent, or radioactive. Stay away. Okay, and we have that Yucca app here. I've got my grandkids are really fascinated by it. They use it all the time now. And they came and said, you have Smarties there. We have M&Ms. Okay, so they said, Papa, did you know that M&M's got a zero? there's
No
nothing.
surprise.
There's nothing worth eating in that. So,
You can show it a piece of cardboard.
yeah,
It's a
so
free.
sometimes they find that this is the only one that's good to eat. This is the only chip that you can, or the crisp that you can buy that you can eat. That's safe, but it tastes terrible. So I said, okay, well, get off crisps then. Try something.
Yeah,
Try
exactly.
cucumbers. Okay.
Bacon. I love doing bacon in the oven,
Uh-huh.
like crispy bacon chips. You know, I follow carnivore diet, so for me it's a bit
Oh, that's good. And
different.
I think
Yeah.
that all of these things. I mean, it's not like what I write about is the Bible that you have to follow it like a rule, but it explains why we have been an abject failure in controlling our weight. And now it's getting to the point in many countries where the cost of childhood diabetes, the cost of adult diabetes, losing limbs, the cost of being obese was never clearer than it was during COVID because those people didn't do well. Why? Because obesity is an inflammatory state. So, the one thing that everyone can agree on, whether you want to define it with skin fold thickness or whether you want to define it by BMI, the one thing we can all agree on is that inflammatory markers in the blood, if I do a blood test on a patient with obese or a person that's grossly obese and someone who's normal weight, the markers for inflammation will be present in the obese individual. Those are specific chemical markers that we see when you have an infection. It means your immune system is busy working. And so when they got COVID, they didn't do well because they were already kind of on fire. They already had the flame going.
The COVID was just a fuel.
That's right. And it was just lit it up. And these people developed multiple organ failures, renal failure, kidney, liver failure, so on and so forth, and heart failure, and they didn't do well. Um, so that's the prevent, and then the last is eliminate, and that's the most difficult. I already said we all have some toxins in our blood, in our body, in our fat cells. Can we get them out? The answer is yes. You have to be patient with it. There are only a few ways out. There's only two ways out of your body. Once you've got chemicals in your body, the only way out is you have to urinate it out or sweat it out. That's the only way. It's not going out any other way. And so there are a number of naturally occurring substances that will help you eliminate these toxic chemicals, allow you to pass them in your urine. I go over all of this in the book, and the book is very heavily researched. So if you want to look at the articles, the actual, the root article that any statement I make in the book, it's backed up by research. So I don't just make a flippant statement saying, oh, they have over 200 toxins. I give you the reference. You want to read it? Read it. You can look at the studies. And that's the way I think books on this subject need to be written. Otherwise, you're getting opinion. And I don't, my opinion going in is we need to exercise more. That's what I thought. And I came out with a whole different, wow, now I understand that all that stuff I was doing research on comes back now to be very important. Food dyes, for example. Let's look at food dyes. Making a big fuss about it in the United States now, but they're terrible. I mean, they have all of these. The food industry is the worst offender. I'm sure you have the same thing in the UK. They have a very strong lobby, and they are looking to make food and make profit and make it look good and make it look bright and colorful, cheerful, and yada yada. But it's not.
It comes back to the convenience thing as well. Um, where in the UK it's quite prevalent for mothers. We call it the beige diet, and it's essentially just chicken nuggets or dino nuggets and fries, McCain fries that they stick in the oven, and that's what the children eat.
It's no
And
different.
then
It's no
they
different
get
here.
yeah, and then they get to a stage where they're like, "Oh my word, my kid doesn't eat anything else," and they don't want to eat anything else other than like these high calorie dense foods that are highly processed, like over processed foods, and they can't understand. But those epigenetics have already changed. That brain chemistry is already involved, like those neural connections have already been formed for those children to be predisposed to choose those foods
Correct.
as opposed to something healthy. Like my son, for example, is turning 2. He grew up on the carnivore diet. He's never had sugar. He's never had anything like any kind of junk food or anything like that. He's healthy. He's growing. He's very doing very well developmentally. He's learning 3 languages. So yeah, it's shocking, and it's interesting when you give like he'll if there's a chocolate or something, if someone has a chocolate, he'll give it to someone or he'll give it to us to eat. It's really strange. He won't put it in his mouth because he doesn't know what it is. So it's really interesting to see how he kind of like he'll just go for that kind of like healthier food, the meats and everything. So
There were studies, and I cite a couple of them in the book, where they took young children, your son's age, and toddlers, basically pre-kindergarten age, and they put them in a room with a choice of foods, and they always chose the healthier foods. Now, it may have been because it was brighter colored. I don't know, but it was interesting. They children, if left on their own, will actually eat a balanced diet. Those studies have been done in a number of different countries, um, which I think is really fascinating. The point that you're making about these epigenetic changes having occurred already, um, and I don't want your viewers or listeners to be concerned that, well, I can't do anything about it. You can. You can change it. You can do it by applying the AIPE formula, and don't try and do it all at once. Just take it one step at a time. And I go through it in the book, but I think it's important to understand that you can be in control of that world that's inside your body. That's very important for your future. And now you have to understand not only your future, but a couple of generations down the line. Here are the studies, to cite one study for you, the great potato famine that occurred. Um, People were starving, and obviously they became very thin. But the epigenetics were altered such that for the next three generations, there was obesity. Okay. So, in other words, the epigenetics changed to say, oh, well, we could come up against another famine. Let's make a lot of fat cells so we could store stuff just in case a famine comes. We are probably in the UK and in the US, we're ready for a famine. I think we'll do well with a famine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not joking.
Yeah.
We've got more obesity than we know what to do with. But the costs of obesity become really important for the viewers to understand. They cost you in your pocketbook. They cost you, and in the U.S., particularly for health insurance, it costs the National Health Service to spend more money on illnesses at younger ages, heart disease in younger people, because the three outcomes of obesity are diabetes, heart disease, and 11 different types of cancer. All of those that have to do with endocrine disruptors. But we were on endocrine disruptors, and so let's talk about what they are. Those endocrine disruptors are chemicals that act like the hormone. So we have what's called xenoestrogen. That's spelled with an X, Xeno, estrogen. What's a xeno? Soy is a xenoestrogen. Okay? So your breast tissue, if you're 8 years old, thinks that the soy molecule coming by and the soy in your blood, um, they think it's estrogen. So it stimulates the breast tissue. It's not really estrogen. You're not making any estrogen really yet of any significance, but that's what's happening. So you look at breast cancer, you look at prostate cancer in men. Uh,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, sorry, it has the effect that where it decreases testosterone levels in men, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah, but it behaves. Age decreases your testosterone, but xenotestosterone's your prostate thinks that's testosterone. So it's multiplying cells. Think of it this way: every time you stimulate cells to multiply, you increase the chances for an error. Oops! Oh, gee, I didn't copy that right. Got the wrong number in there, or whatever it is. And those are the breaks in DNA that happen that start cancers. That's why we say anything that is hormone driven, any tumors that are hormone driven, particularly breast, uterine, cervical, prostate cancer in men, um, uh, many GI cancers are hormone responsive, so on and so forth. Those are important, and to understand that those xenoestrogens or these hormone emulators, endocrine disruptors, whatever you want to call them, they're all the same. They're a molecule that isn't a hormone, but it looks like a hormone. We make some that are related to insulin. And so there are chemicals that the cell thinks looks like insulin, but it isn't really insulin. So you stop making insulin because your pancreas thinks you have plenty of insulin, but it's not really insulin. So it doesn't work. So you get insulin is necessary to get sugar from your blood into the cell. Otherwise, sugar stays in your blood. Sugar can't get into your cell without somebody unlocking the door. And the one that unlocks the door is called insulin. It's a simple way to think about it. So if you're eating something or you're filled with something that kind of pretending to be insulin, but it can't unlock the door, it doesn't have a key. But the pancreas doesn't know that, and the brain doesn't know that. So, the brain tells you, pancreas, okay, cool it, we got plenty. We don't need any more. Turn it off. You get diabetes. And that's what's happening in a larger and larger number of young people, and it becomes uh, um, a tremendous cost. From an industrial standpoint, you can look at the statistics. Obesity in the workforce leads to more days lost from work because they have to go to doctor's appointments, more days lost from work because they have complications of simple procedures. They get infections more often. They have so an obese individual having a minor surgery can turn into a major time off from work. So, a hernia surgery, instead of being 3 or 4 days off, can be 3 or 4 weeks or months because of poor healing and so on and so forth. So it multiplies across, and the costs of this are going to break the bank. They just are, unless we do something about it. We were talking about the GI tract. I just want to talk about that for a second because I know you hear a lot about the microbiome, don't you? Right? The bacteria in your gut. And people have talked about that for a long time. Probiotics, I noticed when I was in London, there's pharmacies sell.
Diversity.
Ah, yeah. So, we have all of those things. The fact is that the gut microbiome, the bacteria that are in your gut, should be well balanced. And when they're not, the gut is very unhappy and it starts to send out signals. And those signals, guess what they do? They change the epigenetics. So we're coming down to something called, what I'm beginning to see now is more and more we really are going to need to focus on epigenetic profiles, which is very, 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 very difficult. If you thought the human genome was difficult, forget about the epigenetic genome. I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to even be possible. Maybe with AI, we'll get a better understanding of the patterns that we're seeing because there are so many
Variables, isn't
variables.
it?
There's so many genes involved and so many attachment points. It's kind of like, if you want to see how you can confuse the world, go to Bletchley Park and look at the Enigma machine. Um,
But also just the chemicals itself that we introduce into the mix. Like if we're talking, so from my recovery point of view, like if we're looking at spice, there's so many different strains essentially, and they all have different, like they present with different health conditions, and it's so difficult to kind of pinpoint, where
I know,
which
I
strain
know,
is associated with which.
right? And I think that everybody watching this should not be saying, oh my gosh, the sky is falling." It's not. Now that you know what is causing it, you're armed. You understand. Yes, it's important to lose weight. Number one, there is no such thing as being obese and being healthy. There is no such thing as healthy at any size. That's a myth. All of the statistics show that if you're obese, your death rates are higher from any illness, your development of diabetes and heart disease and cancer is higher. You can be metabolically fit. You can, at one moment in time, have a normal cholesterol and not be diabetic, and you can work out, and that's good. Don't get me wrong.
Your gut
But
can be on
but
fire.
you've got to lose that weight. And losing that weight and getting down, no matter how you get there, I'm all for it. But what the important message of my book, this podcast is, how the heck do we maintain it? And why can't we maintain it? Well, you can if you know what the problem is. If you think it's the food, you will never you will never get there. If you understand it's your epigenetics that are doing this to you, or perhaps the epigenetics from your grandfather, you can still peel them off. You can still get rid of those epigenetic changes. And it really has to do with behavioral changes in you, how you exercise. Exercising once in a while doesn't change epigenetics. Studies have shown that. Exercising on a regular basis does change epigenetics. Isn't that interesting? So you get a double whammy. It burns calories and it makes your epigenetics better. But you got to do it regularly. And the minute you fall off that wagon, they'll come right back.
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting because it's a similar concept with the adverse childhood experiences where it kind of changes the epigenetics and it affects generations to come. I think there's a recent study that said like the mental health kind of the mother is particularly a big factor in how the children's behavior is influenced as well. Um, so it's quite interesting how that translates over to generations to come. But I think it's important what you said is it's not a death sentence. It's it's not the sky is falling. There is an approach that you can take to better this. I think what I also wanted to say is like I think you touched on this really well, where you mentioned like looking at you we're going to have to start looking at epigenetic profiling, and I wanted to mention that that's so like my stance is very like holistic, and I think we need to be taking holistic approaches to things, and we should stop taking like this narrowed vision approaches, textbook approaches essentially, because for example, I'm in the celiac group, and I say to these people, you've got a metabolic disorder, and all they're focusing on is just to kind of avoid gluten. And I'm like, but they're introducing all these other factors such as drinking alcohol. I'm like, you've got a metabolic disorder. You shouldn't be you should be limiting, gut inflammation. But they're just like, adding fuel to the fire, and then they're like, oh, I've got these symptoms. I must have been glutened. I'm like, no, you're drinking alcohol, you're eating food, you're eating soy products, you're eating food that's over processed, that's mimicking gluten products. Like that's the problem. It's not that you've accidentally had gluten and there's been some cross contamination.
Well, I think
It's like your gut's on fire.
the fascinating part is that you have an opportunity to be at a crossroads. And I think that it's an exciting time for you. Um, I'm a little older, so I don't know how long I'm going to be here for all the excitement. But I think
Hopefully long enough to
make a
give,
difference. Yeah, I hope so.
yeah, make a difference and hand over that knowledge, because you've got a breadth of knowledge. So, we can
Yeah,
all learn.
I think the excitement comes from people your age, even people my age with grandchildren and so on. Um, we we're sitting at a precipice of a lot of knowledge coming our way, coming very quickly. And I look to things like artificial intelligence, and I say, this is one of the areas where AI can really make a difference by analyzing all of these patterns and beginning to put together a cookbook, if you will, of behaviors. Because if anything you've said and I've said should make a difference, it's behavior. Our behaviors become very important. And it's hard to change behaviors when you're older, but it's not so hard to change behaviors when you're younger. Um, I'm not making an excuse for us old folks, but I am saying that behavioral change changes epigenetics in a very, very favorable way. And it doesn't mean, 100% of the time, but enough that these small changes, now if you try and do it all at once, you're going to lose. You can't. So what I tell my patients is, pick a behavior. I eat late at night. All right, but I need something to eat because I stay up late and I like to munch. Okay, well, what are you munching on? Let's take a look at what you're putting in your mouth at 11 o'clock at night. You know, if you like something, I like cold and crunchy things. So I either eat fresh fruit or, like cucumbers. I used to love cucumbers. I just slice them like crisps, and I keep them cold. And then you pop them in your mouth. It's just, to me, it's very satisfying. But
I used to chew on ice.
well, there's a home for people like you. That's in the countryside, but it's okay.
I shouldn't have said that,
Okay, but I think we made the point. There's so much that we could go on and on about, but I think what the message I want to leave your viewers with is, look, we're in a bit of a pickle here. We need to get out of it. We need to do it for the sake of our kids and our grandkids. We need to do it for the sake of ourselves. Um, and we now understand, and so we are on the precipice of perhaps some of the greatest advancements in medicine and in health. Medicine has always been about treating disease and diagnosing disease. Instead, what we can really do now with this new information is promote health. And that's what I think we really have to do. And Outsmarting Obesity is really about, it's a book about, all right, if you get smart, you can outsmart it. If you keep doing the same silly things like going on diets over and over and over again and expecting a different result, it's not going to happen. And that's why I wrote this book. I wrote the book because as I understood more, I realized so few people are ever going to know this. How could I share this with people and let them at least be curious enough, even if 10%, 20% of you out there are curious enough to pick it up, read it, and say, okay, I'm going to look at some of this stuff and I'm going to start making a few changes in the way I live. That's going to benefit you, your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. All those little changes that you make will have a tremendous impact in the future. And that's why I did it.
That's amazing. I think it's really amazing the work you've been doing, the work you're putting out there. I think what you touched on with the fact that behavior is so important is crucial, especially considering our behaviors shape our children's behaviors essentially, and the change starts with us, essentially, and it's not just doing it for generations to come, but for the generations that are involved with us now. So I do think that it's an amazing approach, the APE approach. I think it will benefit a lot of people. So thank you for doing this work and putting all this knowledge out there
Oh, well, thank
for
you for
people to
having me
access.
on. I would love people to either pick up a copy of the book. It's available on Amazon. My website is drlonky.com.
Yeah.
It's very original.
I was just about to say, where's the best place for people
Well,
to
they
kind
could
of
just.
get your book and
I would
reach
like to
you? And
say, well, drlonky.com is a very, very active website. I put up a newsletter. I put up blogs on there 2 to 3 times a week. A newsletter every few weeks about new things that are coming up and staying current in this whole thing because it's an exploding universe.
it's
And now we
moving
have the
fast. Yeah.
yes, it's moving fast, and in our country right now, in the U.S., with RFK Jr. in there, despite everything that people say about him, I love the fact that he is concentrated on all of these chemicals because there are too many of them. It's
I
just,
think he's doing good work.
and
Yeah.
I think that he's bringing attention. Is he going to change the course of mighty rivers? I don't know, but I know that people think about these things now, and that's a good start.
Yes, they're asking the question, isn't it? It's that it's planting that seed to be like start questioning things, start questioning whether this water that I'm drinking, is this okay? this thing I'm using, is that okay? I think
Yeah,
that's what's
right.
important.
And without the fear. And my job is to say, okay, now he's telling you that these things are potentially dangerous. Now I'm going to show you how you can fix that. You can make this better. You really can. I've done it with patients. I've done it with so many patients that have been poisoned and gotten better. So you can do it with your obesity too.
It's giving those patients that self belief and efficacy at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yes.
Telling them that you are capable of healing your body, and you are capable of overcoming these things. It's not it's not the end of the road, or you don't have to panic and
The thing that
start going into a bunker or anything. But
I
there's a way
I
out.
became, I became one of the most sobering moments for me in my all of my medical training was in med school when I learned embryology. And I just looked at this when I walked out of that class, the classes. I used to say to my good friend, there are so many places this can go wrong. Isn't it amazing that it doesn't? It just, it always goes right 90% of the time. So I'm amazed at let's put it this way, the durability of the human
The resilience.
resilience. The younger we are, the more resilient we are. So let's take care
Yeah,
of our kids, right?
yeah.
Well, thank you for having me.
Dr. Lonky, it was such a pleasure to have you, and it was such a pleasure speaking to you. And thanks for sharing your knowledge and being on the podcast today. I look forward to staying in touch, and hopefully in the future do another one. So, just for the listeners, I know you've mentioned you've done a previous book about the chemicals influencing things as well. What's that book called, and where can they find that?
Well, the book is Outsmarting Obesity. That's the one that is currently out. The one I did before is not in print anymore, but we're redoing it right now, and it's going to be called Invisible and um, Unavoidable.
Okay.
Okay,
So I'll just tell the
invisible,
listeners to look out for that.
but yes, invisible and unavoidable. We're working on it right now, and hopefully, we'll have a publisher soon. And it may even be a publisher that has a base in UK, so that'll be exciting because I'll be
Oh, that will be amazing.
yes,
Then you can come
yes, I will.
visit.
All right.
Amazing. I'll make you some good steak, I promise.
Oh, okay. You're lucky I'm not a vegetarian.
Oh, sorry.
I have a granddaughter who would say, "Ooh, no, I don't need
Oh, bless you.
you."
It
Thanks
was
a lot.
really lovely meeting you and speaking to you, Dr.
Nice
Lonky. Thank
meeting
you
you
so
too.
much.
Bye bye.
You too. Have a great evening.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.